what was possibly the best race of the season for Martin Truex Jr. quickly turned into the worst possible result. And he still finished 4th. It's just been that kind of a NASCAR Cup Series season. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove, New Hampshire Race Review Edition. It's great to see you. I love that New Hampshire Motor Speedway is kind of experiencing a new renaissance. Xfinity race was action-packed yesterday. Last year's Cup race was dramatic, featured a surprise winner. Today's race, I thought was dramatic. We saw beating and banging under caution, 2 3-wide racing up front, contact between the leaders racing for the win late, and just like last year, this race also produced a new winner. I feel like people slept on the Magic Mile for a while there, and maybe it was deserved. The racing wasn't always great in the Gen 6 era, but last couple of years and this first race with the next gen, I think gets 2 thumbs up. Great to see the next gen cars race well on a flat, short oval. Earlier this season at Phoenix, Richmond, Martinsville especially, the new cars seemed to really struggle, but lately, Gateway was a pretty good race. I don't think we count Nashville Superspeedway, but if we do, that race was fantastic. And today's race was great as well, so hopefully things trending in the right direction. Anyway, we'll talk more about the racing at the end of this episode. As usual, we're going to talk about the winner, we're going to talk about the top finishers, we're going to look at the playoff grid because today's winner blows that up yet again. I may also touch on some elements of the TV broadcast, but let's actually start with the 4th place finisher today, Martin Truex Jr. Truex has had an up and down season. He's been 5th, 6th, 7th in points most of the year, which typical Martin Truex Jr. right there in contention. But he's winless through the first now 20 races on the season. He's been in contention to win some races like Las Vegas at the beginning of the year. He and Kyle Busch were set to duke it out amongst themselves until a late race yellow. Or Richmond, a race that came down to strategy. Truex had a great strategy, had a great car, just didn't shape up at the finish. Today, though, was probably Truex's best race, certainly the best car he's had. He sat on the pole for the first time in his entire Joe Gibbs Racing career. I think he led every single lap of stage 1, he led almost every lap of stage 2, swept the first 2 stages. He also leads the Cup Series this year with, I think now 7 stage wins. But stage 3, things suddenly fell apart for the 19 team. Caution came out for Todd Gilliland spinning with about 96 laps to go, right on the edge of the fuel window. Kurt Busch, Joey Logano, Cole Custer stayed out. Martin Truex Jr. took 2 tires as some drivers like Kyle Larson took 0. Truex was back in some traffic on the restart and got passed almost immediately by guys like Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, Kevin Harvick. Suddenly Martin Truex Jr. was radioing the crew that it just won't go. The race ended with a long green flag run. Truex had enough fuel to make it, also passed some more cars on the long run, still finished a very solid, a very respectable 4th. But if Martin Truex Jr. and team had managed to seal the deal today, he would be not just locked into the playoffs, he would be tied, I think, for like the 4 seed with all those playoff points. But instead, because Truex finished 4th, and more importantly because his teammate Christopher Bell got the win, Martin Truex Jr. now sits 16th on the playoff grid, the last guy in on points. Martin Truex Jr. is on the cut line with 6 regular season races left. And may I remind you, 2 of those races are at road courses, which have produced a couple first-time winners this year. Another one is at a super speedway, Daytona, the night race, always a wild card. Throw in Michigan, which could race very differently than in years past. Throw in Pocono, they don't call it the tricky triangle for nothing. Martin Truex Jr. goes from being locked into the playoffs as one of the top seeds to now the last guy in the most precarious points position he has ever been, at least in his Joe Gibbs Racing career, for many, many years. Truex is almost always the kind of guy who locks himself into the playoffs early on. Here we are in July, and Martin Truex Jr. is in the danger zone. A heartbreaking finish to this race for Martin Truex Jr., and he finished 4th. That's what's so crazy about this season. The next gen car promised a more even playing field, more parity. I think many of us were a little skeptical of that claim, but here we are in July, 14 different winners. This regular season has been extraordinarily competitive, but now I'm even looking ahead to the playoffs. These final 10 races, we're used to maybe thinking like 7 or 8 guys have a realistic shot at the title. Christopher Bell won today. He is right now the 14 seed, and I think he has a legit championship shot. He's not the favorite, but he could realistically go on a tear and make some noise in October and November. I wouldn't be shocked. This season has been extremely competitive, and unfortunately, right now Martin Truex Jr. is not benefiting from it. Anyway, I'll talk about some of the other top finishers in a moment. Now let's actually talk about the winner, Christopher Bell. No surprise here. Christopher Bell has made 3 Xfinity starts at New Hampshire. He's won all of those. Last year, he probably wins the Cup race if not for the race being called early due to darkness. I picked him to win this past Wednesday night if you watched the live stream on this channel, and he got it done. He wasn't the best car today consistently. I think Truex clearly was the class of the field in the first half or the first 2/3. Chase Elliott had to go to the rear at one point for a pit stop error. They had to pit twice to get a wheel nut tight, but he was able to drive through the field and make noise. Kevin Harvick today had one of the fastest cars he's had all season, and considering his past success at New Hampshire, he was a real threat today. But lo and behold, when push comes to shove, Christopher Bell gets the win. He drove off and left him at the end, won this race by like 5+ seconds, and shout out to Bell's pit crew, who we gave some grief to last week. Remember 2 weeks ago, a couple key members of Bell's crew were sent to Bubba Wallace's team, and Bubba Wallace's crew had a couple key members sent to Christopher Bell's. The very first week after this change, Bell had a wheel fall off on pit road. Almost faced a suspension. His crew chief did, but didn't. Today though, the 20 team was flawless, and according to NBC Sports, that team actually put together 2 of the 3 fastest 4-tire stops of the day. So credit where credit is due. The pit crew was on it, the driver was on it there towards the end, raced Chase Elliott, raced Kurt Busch, Joey Logano very, very cleanly, very fairly, and the car was great. They got it done. Congratulations to Christopher Bell and the 20 team. This is Bell's first win of this season, but it's his second win now of his career. It's a very clutch win as well. I'm talking about Truex being on the bubble. Coming into today, it was Christopher Bell on the bubble, 16th on the grid with no wins. He was 8th in the regular season standings coming into today, so a win virtually locks him into the playoffs. But without a win, a playoff berth was far from guaranteed. In fact, I've been saying for the last few weeks that guys like Bell, and I've even been throwing Truex into this basket the last few weeks, they need to win if they want to make the playoffs. I don't think Truex gets in without a win, and I didn't think Bell would get in without a win. I said it on this show, so glad at least one of those 2 got it done today. You know, besides the wins column, which Denny Hamlin has 2, Bell only has 1, Bell has actually been arguably the best Joe Gibbs Racing car statistically this year. Like, to me, it's between him and Kyle Busch. They now have the same number of top 10s. I think Busch has 1 or 2 more top 5s. So it's close. Christopher Bell has not been far off his Joe Gibbs Racing teammates this year, so I'm glad he's starting to get some credit, and glad he's starting to get results and trophies to show for it. Moving on, there are a few other top finishers I want to mention. Chase Elliott, boy is he on a tear. His last 4 races, first, second today. Yeah, he roughed up some drivers towards the end. He got into Joey Logano battling for second. Logano radioed that he thought contact from Elliott might have damaged their left rear toe link. Then after making that pass, eventually Elliott got into Kurt Busch and then ran Kurt Busch wide in the middle of the turns. I'm sure didn't make any friends there. He probably saw Christopher Bell in his rearview mirror and said, I gotta go at all costs. But, you know, Chase Elliott trying not to make too many enemies here. I said last week after his victory that he has emerged as the clear championship frontrunner. And from a speed and performance standpoint, I think that still stands true today. But like I've said about Ross Chastain this year, you don't want to earn a negative reputation going into the most important 10 races of the year. That almost bit Chase Elliott last season when he got into it with Kevin Harvick, and Harvick almost ended Elliott's season at the Roval. He certainly tried to. He did all he could. Would hate to see Elliott make similar enemies this year, so just something to watch, a storyline to watch, but speed is there. Elliott was fast today, one of the few cars that could pass left and right all night long, all day long. Good run for the 9 car. Third, Bubba Wallace. What a run for the 23 car. Started 4th, ran inside the top 10 pretty much all day, and finished his 3rd. Really strong run for Bubba Wallace. Probably his most impressive drive all season long. Like, yeah, he finished 2nd at Daytona, but that is a super speedway. There was wrecks towards the end, and this race with all the shifting, so many driver elements playing a factor, I think Bubba Wallace could be proud of this run. I briefly mentioned him earlier, but Kevin Harvick, a top 5, also had a great car, one of the best cars he's had all season at one of his best tracks. I thought early on he was going to be the guy to challenge Martin Truex Jr. for the win. Still a good run, but a bit disappointing. He's 17th on the playoff grid. He is in must-win territory, and feels like maybe you let one chance slip out from between your fingers here today. Hamlin had so many issues on pit road today. A lot of them were driver issues, sliding too deep into the box, etc. But he comes back to finish 6th. That's pretty impressive. I wonder what he had for the leaders if he ever got to the front. Meanwhile, Brad Keselowski, who also has a very strong history here at New Hampshire, he finishes 7th in that number 6 car. What was going on between him and Austin Dillon? It sounds like not even they know what was happening. I haven't seen anyone ask Austin Dillon yet, but during a caution period, Austin Dillon in the 3 suddenly just kind of doored, kind of lightly sideswiped Keselowski under yellow. Keselowski doesn't like being hit under yellow. He's said that before. He reverted back to 2014 Brad for a moment there and just started door slamming Austin Dillon down the backstretch. Little surprised to see that kind of aggression out of Brad, but I mean, I guess Austin Dillon did hit him first, and Keselowski's crew didn't seem to know what was going on. I don't even think Austin Dillon's crew chief knew what the rage was about, but clearly Austin Dillon wasn't happy with the 6, and they got into it under caution. Keselowski roughed up the 3 and still had enough car underneath him to finish 7th. Great run for Brad. Top 10s for both Trackhouse cars, good for them, and Kurt Busch actually came back to finish 10th despite having to pit during the final run for fuel. Last guy I want to mention here in the top 15, Kyle Busch, was like the cat with 9 lives. He spun out all by himself twice today in front of traffic, somehow avoided significant damage in both incidents. He managed to battle back to finish 12th. He was actually running up inside the top 10 pretty late in this race. He actually passed Martin Truex Jr. on that final restart at one point, and I thought the world was imploding. How did Truex, the dominant car of the day, go from winning this race to getting passed by Kyle Busch, who had spun out twice? Like what a roller coaster of a race this was. Still, solid comeback for Kyle Busch, but you can't help but think he may be pressing a little bit considering his uncertain NASCAR future. Very early in this race, on lap 6, I believe, Ty Dillon got pinched by Justin Haley, who just didn't know the 42 was down there. Dillon got sideways, overcorrected, slid up into Alex Bowman. Huge damage on both the 42 and 48 cars. Bad break for Bowman, definitely qualified bad to be back there, so I can't say it's all bad luck. Sometimes in racing you gotta make your own luck, and the 48 team didn't do any of that this weekend, but still, rough stretch for the 48. 3 DNFs the past 4 weeks for Alex Bowman. Remember earlier this year when I praised him and that team for being so consistent this year? Man, they've run into a brick wall the past month. Those were your top finishers. Real quick, let's look at the playoff grid and see how badly Christopher Bell messed things up. Bell's name is now lit up, as you can see. Martin Truex Jr. now on the cut line. Kevin Harvick even further back. Eric Almirola even further back. Must-win territory. Ryan Blaney's the interesting one there in 15th. We've got 16 races to go. We could get 16 different winners. We're at 14. And like I already said, there's some wild cards coming up and some pretty good cars down here that have shown speed recently. Harvick has shown speed recently. Truex could have won today's race. Bubba Wallace had speed today and he's not even pictured. So not even Ryan Blaney can be feeling safe right now. And he's second in the regular season standings. This year has been nuts. This year has truly put the win and you're in playoff system to the ultimate test. That's a conversation for another day. But as things stand right now, boy, Christopher Bell blew things up once again. Now, lastly, I want to talk about this race a bit, and I do want to give some props to NBC/USA Network. Rick Allen was not in the booth today, and I was worried I'd truly miss him, and I did a little bit. I do feel like a play-by-play guy is important, someone who understands TV, who can take pressure off the drivers and crew chiefs in the booth, let them just do their analytical thing. The TV guy can take care of the TV responsibilities. They put Dale Jr. in that role, and I thought he did pretty well in that role. He was at his best when he was just calling the action on the track, and he did fine. But I don't really want to see NBC get away from having a traditional TV play-by-play guy in the booth. There's a reason every other sport typically has a non-former athlete in that role. Someone who, again, understands pacing, understands the presentation, understands TV in a way former athletes typically don't. Not saying there aren't former athletes in NASCAR or in other sports that really get TV and thrive on TV, but that play-by-play role is usually reserved for someone who has grown up in the TV industry. So I hope this driver, crew chief only booth is just a temporary experiment. Again, they were fine today, but I do think in the long run we'll miss out on having a Rick Allen. And I know people have strong takes on Rick Allen. He's fine. I do think the viewer will miss out if we don't have Rick Allen or someone like a Rick Allen in the booth most weeks. That being said, there were a few really nice touches I noticed this week. Maybe these were present the last couple weeks and I just didn't notice, but like after each stage, they would show a little box on the lower right-hand corner of the screen that was like a little stage recap for maybe fans who are just sitting back down or went to get a beer and missed the very end of the stage. Just recapping some of the key storylines. I really appreciate that little detail. And I also noticed on the side ticker, whenever they were highlighting a certain battle or battles on track, split screen, they would highlight the two drivers' names in blue. I'd seen them try something like that before, like they'd highlight them in yellow sometimes, but I saw a lot more split screen today on the broadcast than I feel I'm used to seeing. So highlighting the names in blue, like here's the battle for 13th and 14th, here's 5th and 6th, actually was helpful. I think it allowed me to really quickly piece what I was watching and put it together. So a lot of good things about the NBC/USA Network broadcast today, but just wanted to air some thoughts there. Now let's talk about the race. Like I said, New Hampshire to me is on the up and up. Yesterday's Xfinity race had some very dramatic moments, and today's Cup race. Stage 1 was dry, not much passing, track position race. But Stage 2 and Stage 3, strategy, tire wear, very evident. Lots of passing up front. Restarts were hectic, 3 wide, 4 wide sometimes. In the Xfinity race yesterday, we had a great 4 wide move for second. Cars were tough to drive. Kyle Busch spun out twice, all on his own. I really felt like the best drivers and teams had to work for it today. So I know Christopher Bell ran off and hit at the very end, won this race by 5 seconds, but the first 270 laps or so, I thought were excellent. Putting this race on the Groovy gauge, I'm going to give it a very similar score to what I gave Atlanta last weekend. Even though the two were completely different races, I'm going to give this one an 80% as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This summer stretch with New Hampshire, Pocono, these were typically the races I didn't look forward to every year. But I was looking forward to New Hampshire today, and it did not let me down. Hopefully Pocono continues that trend next week. I can't say much bad about this race other than I guess the margin of victory was very high, but sometimes that happens. I'm used to races that Martin Truex Jr. dominates being really, really boring. But today was not that at all. And I know Truex didn't ultimately win the race, but he was still dominant for like 75% of it. Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. What'd you think of the racing out at New Hampshire Motor Speedway today? How do you feel about Christopher Bell getting the win? Is Chase Elliott the top championship threat right now in your opinion? Share your thoughts down in the comment section below. That's gonna do it for this race recap. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We not only recap races every Sunday, we also talk NASCAR news and we discuss rumors during the week. So a lot of great content you're not gonna wanna miss. As always, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters as well for going the extra mile and generously supporting this channel and keeping it growing. Busy week of news ahead. I've already got a couple stories I'm behind on that we'll be reacting to and discussing in the very near future. I'll also be at Pocono Raceway this next week, and it'll be my first trip out to the Triangle. I'm excited. Keep an eye out for some news regarding potential meetups and other things I'll be working on while I'm there. That's gonna do it for this episode, y'all. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend.